All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight for the Vegetation Management Grant Program's community workshops. This is the first of two that we'll be hosting this Tuesday, today, and next week on Tuesday, again at the same time from 5 to 6:30. And we'll have a couple of special guests from Ben Nichols from CAL FIRE, Robert Aguero from Permit Sonoma, and Carleon Safford from Permit Sonoma. So tonight we will be covering a variety of topics. We want to provide you with a little bit of an agenda. It was up on the screen just a moment ago. I'll share my screen to be able to let you know what we're going to be covering. And so tonight we'll be providing you some information about how the process will be run. Essentially the description of the grant program and the process, and walk through the application in a relatively quick way. Then we will have a short presentation by Carleon Safford about the Community Wildfire Prevention Plan Project Entry Portal, which is that requirement for applying to the Vegetation Management Grant Program. We'll have an introduction to environmental compliance by Robert Aguero, and then we'll wrap up with the vegetation management implementation, trying to get a perspective of how CAL FIRE's regional perspective and state responsibilities are, and how they are able to complement the work that we're trying to do with the vegetation management program, and also share some of the criteria for successful projects and proposals. Okay, and then we do want to spend a fair amount of time on questions and answers. That's always been a valuable part of this process. And so with that, I'll stop sharing that screen and go to the to our PowerPoint presentation. Let me check that out. Okay, great. So can you see that, folks? My panelists can give me a nod. Okay, great, thanks. All right, so again, my name is Kim Batchelder. I'm the Vegetation Management Coordinator for Sonoma County Ag and Open Space. This program is sponsored by the County of Sonoma, and we are managing it from the grant perspective. How to apply, you will apply through this application process and be able to provide. We wanted to host this workshop to provide you some insight about how to apply and what are some of the key things that we're looking for in 2023. With us, I mentioned Carleon Safford, Robert Aguero, and Ben Nichols. And so, again, some of the things that we're going to try to focus on today is through the description of a grant process, community wildfire protection plan, the environmental compliance, regional priorities and criteria for successful projects, and then end with some questions and answers. So just a little bit about the grant program. Since 2021, we've been able to fund 46 different projects worth about $8.3 million across the county. This program is funded by a settlement fund through a PG&E lawsuit from 2017 after the Tubbs fire. This funding has been able to provide grant support to these 46 different projects. I want to show you a map to give you a sense of the distribution of these projects throughout the county. You can see they're in a lot of the areas that are high priority. Some are planning documents called the CalVTP, which we'll get into in a moment. We will also see projects such as defensible space and treatments of fuel types as shaded fuel breaks and things like that. We've sponsored prescribed grazing, prescribed fire projects, projects such as chipper programs in everywhere along the northwestern coast to down to Sonoma Valley, where equipment was purchased through the grant program. So with that, I just wanted to highlight some of the key processes that we're going to be using during this process. I'll go through them in broad strokes and then dive a little deeper into each one of the documents that are available on our website. So essentially, we really encourage you to review the grant guidelines. A lot of care was put into that document to be able to help you figure out exactly what the county is looking for in trying to support fuel treatments and community outreach and education for the purposes of reducing the threat of wildfire in our county. Next, you would go on and complete your application. We really want you to provide a project map to show us where you are specifically working on your treatment. What is your proposed treatment area? And then a location map helps us understand what part of the county you're going to be working in. So those are two features that we really hope to do, and I'll give you some idea of what's going on there as far as the types of maps we want you to present. And the next, we really want you to be able to confirm whether your project is environmentally compliant, whether it meets CEQA, and Robert will get into that in a little bit more detail. And finally, it is a requirement for you to submit your project or enter your project into the CWPP Project Entry Portal, which will go live shortly. And Carleon will be able to share what the procedure is and how to use that tool. Okay, so let's go in a little bit deeper. These different links that hopefully are going to function okay. Robert, can you confirm that our website's on there? I might have to.
I'm still seeing the grant application process page.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll just stop sharing and reshare again. It's always tricky going to some of our links. So let's try that again. And there we are. Okay, are we seeing our website now, the Vegetation Management website? Okay, so this is what our website looks like. And this is the Vegetation Management Grant Program. And the access point is in the application period or on our website. So this is what all the details about when the application period is open. It started on March 23rd, and the deadline is April 20th at 5 p.m. Then you can go to the grant guidelines, which I mentioned earlier, and those look like this is a PDF document that has a fair amount of information. So we really encourage you to go through it carefully so you really understand what are some of the key features to this grant program. And then, then the other thing I wanted to touch on is the application itself. And Robert, can you confirm you're seeing the grant application? Thank you. So the grant application is not too onerous, but it does provide you good information. This is where you will submit your grant application to vegemanagement@sonoma-county.org. All proposals must be submitted electronically. And then the project entry portal is going to be live. We said March 29th, but we will hear from Carleon on an update for that. Again, the due date is April 20th at 5 p.m. And then if you have any specific questions about trying to understand how the grant process works, we ask you that you submit them to the Veg Management email address that's posted there by April 13th. So it doesn't give you a lot of time, but it helps you to understand what we're exactly looking for. We're not going to provide opinions about whether your project should be submitted, but more the technical nature of how to apply to the program. And again, the deadline for that is April 13th, and we'll have a response to all the questions by April 17th and send out to the list that has received this application process via email. Again, we're hosting this workshop tonight. We will host another one next Tuesday. It'll essentially be the same information, and all of these workshops will be posted on our website if you want to go back and see them again. Or if you're unable to attend, you can attend that way. So then going in a little bit deeper, these are some of the things that are very similar to what our application looked like last year. But last year we had 4 different documents that you had to submit. This year we tried to consolidate it all into one form that is a fillable PDF. So you should be able to put all your information right into this application, save it as a separate file, and then submit it to me via the Veg Management email address. This way you can just mark what is your project like? Does it contain these different types of projects? You will put your name as the project manager and your title. And then we do want you to look at the grant agreement, the attachment at the bottom of the page, to understand what are the contracts that you're entering into. You'll enter your name and sign that you will agree with the conditions of the grant agreement if you were selected for a grant in this year. Then we have a small box for you to enter a project description, a project summary that should consist no more than 2 to 3 paragraphs. And this is the same project summary that you can use. You can do a cut and paste and enter it into the project portal or entry portal that Carleon will address in just a moment. Then there's a series of questions that all relate to the project itself. The first question is a more detailed summary of the project that you're doing. You are limited to 1 page in that regard. And then in question 2, you're looking at what you are actually going to do. We're trying to make this as practical as possible so that you don't go into too much description about why your project is or your area is at risk. We have a lot of good data to be able to share that with to be able to understand where your project might be and what types of risk you're looking at. But what we want to hear from you is the actual action that you're proposing in this particular project to be able to reduce the risk of wildfire in your community or wherever you live. So those are the types of things we really want you to focus on. Again, more description about your treatment methodology. What prescriptions are you going to be using to accomplish your goals? There's many different treatments out there. You could use prescribed burns or prescribed grazing. You could use hand crews. All of these have different elements of complexity. So we want you to be able to demonstrate your ability to accomplish the goals through a good description of your project. The next section is referring to the importance of the project to your community. This goes into a little bit of the risk, but we don't want to belabor this. We really want you to focus on the types of things that are important, why this project is important for your community. As you heard in our description, we really want to see collaboration and an opportunity for groups and landowners to work together. We do not fund individual landowners. We support projects that are working together as a community to be able to accomplish a goal for the whole community. And then the next section is about the connectivity to other regional efforts. There's a lot of different collaborations that are occurring throughout the county. And so we want you to be familiar with those and really illustrate how your project might tie in and add value to some of the projects that have already been funded by either CAL FIRE grants or other vegetation management grants, and ways in which we can really support that effort to continue to improve over time. We've been offering this grant program since June of 2021, and we've been able to apply or see 46 different successful projects across the county. So we really want to encourage people to show how your project connects to other collaborations. And then finally, the project mapping. So I want to go back to our other slideshow just to show you a little bit about or an example of some of the maps that we have. But just to highlight this point, you can do it several different ways. You can cut and paste an image right into this box. You can send a separate image through a JPEG or PDF file format. Those are preferable. And if you have GIS capability, a shapefile would also be acceptable too if you send that via email to us as well. Again, this is the type of thing where we're trying to provide as much flexibility as possible, depending on every level of technology and ability for the different community groups. So we want to be flexible on how you provide that information, but it is important to show where your project is located and how you hope to accomplish your goals. Okay, and finally, just a work schedule and a cost of the project. The work schedule is we want to see bullets. We want to see when you hope to start, when your CEQA compliance would be completed, those types of major tasks through in this particular box. Bullets are fine. You don't need to show a great deal of detail, but we want you to be able to provide an adequate start time and when you hope to accomplish your complete your project. In this case, all projects that are funded in 2023 must be completed by December 31st of 2024. So essentially, we have 18 months to get the project done. And so we want you to be able to explain how you're going to get that project done in an 18-month grant period, okay? And then finally, cost of the project. It's really important to be able to show clear cost estimates, okay? This box actually leads you to the template and down below you can see, please use project cost estimate template. And so for greater details, and that can be found on our website as an Excel spreadsheet. If you're not familiar with Excel spreadsheets, we can send you a PDF that's included in this document where you can just fill in your document. Actually, I think it is at the bottom of the page. Okay, so here we go. So this template is fillable. So you can add your costs, basically your salaries, what types of contractual labor you might have if you're contracting it out, and be able to enter how much you are requesting from the grant and if you have a match to be able to support whatever grant that you're trying to do. Again, we're trying to consolidate our kind of awkward process that we used last year into one document as best as possible. But like I mentioned, things like the cost estimate can be a separate Excel spreadsheet if that's something you're familiar with, or you can just populate this. It will be more of a manual entrance of all those different costs. And then also with your maps, you'll want to attach the different maps. And then finally, you are allowed to enter cost or benefits and success of the projects. How are we going to measure the success of your project? Is it going to be in acres of treated areas? Is it going to be number of people who are going to be attending your workshops or something to that effect? But again, let's keep this short, just really focus on the key elements that you think are going to be measurable to demonstrate the type of benefits that your project will provide. And then finally, if you have any specific items that haven't been covered, we allow you half a page to describe something critical that we haven't captured in your application, okay? And section 6 in this case is CEQA. And Robert will go into more detail there, but we do want you to fill these are all checkable and you can demonstrate who would be the lead agency, when do you hope to have the completion of that CEQA document already, okay? So hopefully this is all going to be a lot simpler to provide us with the information that is essential for our project, for our proposal review. So let me stop sharing for now and go ahead and let me go back to a little bit of logistics. I'm seeing a question here. And so what we're going to do for questions and answers, during the presentation, we'd like you to provide your questions directly in the Q&A comment section. The chat is live, but we'd prefer you enter your questions in the Q&A at the bottom. And by entering your question there, one of the panelists will hopefully be monitoring that, and we can all share in our responses. Or if it needs to be elevated to more of a discussion live, then we're good with that as well. Okay, so let me see. Also, when we get to the Q&A, we ask that you raise your hand. There's an icon at the bottom of the screen. Most of you all are familiar with the Zooms at this point, but please raise your hand to let us know that you'd like to ask a question, and then we can recognize your question and then be able to go live with that. Okay, so with that, I'm going to share my screen again to go to the PowerPoint. All right, so I just wanted to provide folks with an example of the map and see if that works. Robert had a nod to whether that's available. Not seeing that. It should be a project map of Oddfellows. No. All right, let's stop sharing and try sharing again. Okay, so here's a pretty good example of a project map that highlights the types of defensible space the community wants to do around the homes and the project-specific area, that is the hatched mark areas around on the WUI side of the community. So the area, the interface between the wildlands area and the more urban or community areas. So that is gives the proposal reviewer a clear idea of what the extent of the land ownership is and where they intend to do the different types of treatment areas throughout this community. Okay, so let me stop sharing that and go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so we're back to the PowerPoint now, Robert. Perfect, thank you. So what I wanted to share with you next is the schedule. See that? So this is the grant timeline. Again, we'll have another workshop next Tuesday from 5 to 6:30. The deadline for questions is April 13th. We will provide a response by April 17th, and the deadline for this grant will be April 20th. And so I'm going to channel my inner Chief Nichols and just answer the question about why such a fast deadline. I've heard a little bit of feedback that it's too fast to put together a project. And our discussion here really is based on the fact that great projects should continually be worked on, that we should be working with our fire departments, we should be working with our fellow landowners. This shouldn't be an urgent cry to create the proposal as soon as you receive the invitation for a grant opportunity. You should be working with your landowner, your fellow neighbors, to develop a strategy. That's why some of the work that's being done with the community wildfire protection plans on the local level, the fire safe communities, all these folks are working together to identify highest priorities. And so this is a call to action. We want people to really be able to populate our grant application with good projects that are thoughtful and are not last minute. So we have a short deadline because we really want to support projects that have already been really well thought of and are seeking opportunities through CAL FIRE grants or U.S. Forest Service grants through the CWPPs or different elements, so that when they come to us and say, well, we've tried submitting applications to these different programs, let's try the Vegetation Management Grant Program, because maybe as a local grant program, it might be more successful for a local project, okay? So with that, the deadline is a hard stop on at 5 o'clock on April 20th. Must be submitted through the Vegetation Management email address. Then the selection committee will review these proposals in the first week of May, and we hope to be able to give an answer to all applicants by the 24th of May. We'll have selected the projects. We'll be developing a board report for the board of supervisors to review, and they will give their final approval of the grants on June 6th at a board event on that day. And so then the projects would start as soon as the execution of the grant agreement is finalized, working with the County of Sonoma, and I will be helping to facilitate the signatures of all those grant agreements that have been approved, okay? So with that, I'd like to have Carleone share her screen and be able to describe how the project entry portal works. With that, I'll stop sharing my screen and introduce Carleone from Permit Sonoma.
Carleone, you're on mute.
But you can't see my screen, right?
Yes.
Hey, that's a win. Thanks. And hi, everybody. And thanks for caring about wildfire safety in your community. So that's a super exciting opportunity. So I am here this evening to talk briefly about the project entry portal, where you can enter and map your project, not only to complete your application for the Vegetation Management Grant Program, but also to get your project listed in the CWPP and thus receive priorities for other fundings for having that project listed. We've been working feverishly on getting this thing up and making it a lot easier than it was last year. So some of you experienced it last year or might find it a lot easier this year. This is all part of the Sonoma County Community Wildfire Protection Plan 2023 update, which will go to the board hopefully on May 9th. So we're kind of excited about that. It is just about done, and many of you have probably participated in that process. What a CWPP does writ large is we really hope that this will bring together residents, agencies, everybody to sort of collaboratively identify what your values are, what your wildfire issues and risks are, and prioritize areas to strategize and reduce risk. So that includes all kinds of projects, vegetation management, which is the side we're talking about tonight, including a variety of different treatment methods, defensible space and structure hardening, my own personal favorite. And at the end of the day, all of these projects that get mapped in here end up on a single map that we can look at as a group to identify trends and gaps. So if there are places that are really high risk, but there's no projects there, we might want to encourage people to write them. If, on the other hand, we have a place like this where we have multiple projects intersecting in one place, maybe we can get everybody together to make a stronger program for next year. So that's why we really want these all entered into the CWPP. It will ultimately help all of us. So the CWPP is it's a two-part deal. It's a written document and the hub site and project entry portal. And the hub site and project entry portal is where you're mostly will be. We are currently working on this. On the project entry portal, you will find the Sonoma County Wildfire Risk Index, which I'm not going to discuss tonight. Highly recommend that you take a look at it. Go in there, make it big, make it small, and you can really see what the risk as identified in the CWPP for your area is. You can read all about that. We also have the WRI, what's currently called the WRI statistics page, which we are going to rename as the project planning tool, because it's really, it's an awesome project planning tool. And before you go in and draw your map, if you go in there and draw your polygon on there, it'll spit out at you how many houses are in here, how many people are senior citizens, how many people are non-English speakers. It'll spit out all kinds of statistics that will really help you to carefully refine your project area to make your project more desirable. So definitely check out the statistics tool or project planning tool. And finally, the CWPP project list, which is now renamed the project entry portal, or the PEP, as we like to call it familiarly. And that's where you'll be doing most of your stuff. So I think you'll find this much easier. I have gone ahead and put a bunch of questions in here so that I can run through this. And honestly, this shouldn't take you, if you have, there's only 2 long questions in here. And if you have some basic project descriptions written, which you have to do, you can use the same one on Kim's side and on my side. It really shouldn't take you long to do this. And we've tried really hard to make this easier and more efficient for you. So you'll get to your first screen. There's a bunch of basic information about the portal and how it's all going to work. There are 2 survey types that we have going in here this year. We have the long survey, which is what you must use to submit this project for your application. If you mistakenly choose the short survey, I will get notification that it's in there, but Kim won't. So make sure that you choose the long survey option down here at the bottom of the page. All you got to do is click on it. So you click on that, and that's going to key up all the questions you want. The short survey is a little shorter. The questions are easier, but you need the longer one. And still, I think you will find it easy. This first page is all the project contact information. So what's the name of your organization? What kind of organization are you? Do you have a taxpayer ID, which is something that you need in order to submit a grant? That's why Kim said we can't take applications from individuals, right? We're looking for organizations, collaborative programs with the taxpayer ID. For the sake of the CWPP, you don't have to have that taxpayer ID. Kim, do you have to have, if you're a group, you do have to have a taxpayer ID for your program, correct? Oh,
That's
you're muted.
correct. You have to be an organization that can enter into essentially a binding agreement with the county, so that if you're an informal organization, you'll have to find a fiscal sponsor for the project.
So if you have a fiscal sponsor identified, you'll put your fiscal sponsor name here, right? So we're just, for the sake of our argument, we're going to say we are an organization with a taxpayer ID. And then we're just asking for the contact name and email, and then your name as the submitter. So Kermit Cares is your name. You'll see why I called it Kermit in a little while. And your email. We do not share this information publicly. This will be hidden once we get to the project list stage. But we need to be able to contact you if we have questions about your form. So make sure and get that straight. So a lot of these questions, like cooperating agencies and groups, this is on here. And this is a really good way to show what Kim was just talking about. I've been working on this project. I've been thinking about this project, and who I have spoken to are these agencies. You're just going to list them, name, email, and the agency is great. But if you don't have any of those and you choose no, that box isn't even going to pop up. Right, so this is going to be a quick through. So if you made this up on your own and you say no, you can just go to next. If you say yes, you're just going to put in the primary collaborators there. So you're going to put in your project title, which is Keen to Be Green, which is why I called myself Kermit on this one. So Keen to Be Green. Treatment types. I think that you will find this quite user-friendly once you get into it. Do take the time to read what we mean by these categories for your treatment types here. So take a minute to read those, and what's going to happen is you're going to come down here and you're going to choose your option. Is this a defensible space project? Yes or no. If it's not, if you're not doing any defensible space, you get no, your window doesn't pop up, you can move on to the next thing, right? Are you doing roadside fuels treatment? Well, yes, I am. Yes, I am. And so that's going to pop up this click menu, and you can click as many as apply. So to do your roadside fuels treatment, you're going to be using large mechanical like a masticator. I'm also using a hand crew. Oh, and I'd really like to put some goats out there. So you can click all three of those options if they're realistic for your project design. Don't click more because you think it's going to give your project more weight. It doesn't. And in fact, if you have too many of them, that can kind of make us go, that sounds a little too ambitious. So you'll just go through each of these and click the whether you're in, is this a wildland fuels treatment project? If yes, again, click all that apply. Is it a post-fire mitigation project? I said no. Our back-end GIS information will tell us if your project is in a fire footprint. So if you said yes, but you're not in a fire footprint, that might make us wonder about your project, right? So truth is important. But just fill each of these in. Are you hardening structures? There are different options in structure hardening. We don't have all the wildland fuels. I only have one in there, modify structures. Critical infrastructure, if you're doing that, what you can do is modify existing structures for ignition resistance, do defensible space, or modify, build, or create new critical infrastructure. Sorry about that. The perils of working at home. Same education. If you're doing that, then you're going to have, what are you educating about? Planning. We have a couple of different documents you can use. If none of them apply, you can click on this one and write a very brief description of what you're doing. So that I think you won't find difficult. It'll take you shorter time to do it than it took me to talk about it. Your project description, 1,000 characters limit. This is 1,000 characters right here. So it's roughly 2 paragraphs. You should be able to get it in there. Do read what I'm looking for in that project description and include that there. This is not where you talk about why you need the project or what the risk is. You can talk about that down here in 500 characters, which is what you see here. So those are really the only 2 places that you have a lot of writing to do. The rest is pretty quick. What's your project cost? This can go from no cost to very high. If you have a project maintenance plan, this is where you can describe it. This is a tough thing to do for grants, but it's critical. So if you have a plan, go ahead and put it in here. Again, if you don't have a project maintenance plan yet, choose not yet, and the descriptive box isn't going to pop up. So this is the part that causes people the most anxiety, I do believe, and this is the map. It shouldn't be that hard to do, I hope. We're going to do a video presentation for this and put it on the web so you can watch this in slow-mo. I've started a project here. I'm going to go ahead and trash that project so you can watch me actually enter it. So you will get to here. You're going to say, yes, I want to do a project. I want the map to be big though. So when you go back there, when you click this little M looking thing over here, that's your mapping tool. And now we have the little orange button that's going to show. And when you click this, that's going to make it big so you can actually see where it is. When you want to draw your project, you start wherever you want to start. You can follow the parcel lines. You can make this bigger or smaller. It's great to get it sort of dialed in before, but you can click as many times as you want. So if you have a funny curve, like I want to follow a road somewhere, you can do that. Like here, I'm going to go down this road and up that road and down this road. And then I'm going to go over here into the park, which I am doing on purpose because we are tracking anywhere. If your project is on public land, you must have permission from the public landowner agency in order to get this project onto the CWPP list. We can't list projects that haven't been approved by the agency. So when you're done, all you got to do is double click. There it is. You can close that and there's your project. Tells you your perimeter, your acres, all of that good stuff. We're asking you if it includes public land. We will know if it includes public land from the GIS, so make sure and get that right. And if you do have it, we need the public landowner and contact information for the person that you've spoken to about it, and we will follow up with them. Landowner, private property. If you've started the process, that's hugely helpful. We don't expect that you've started the process. Often that's something you want to fund with grant funds. But if you have, and you say yes, you get to tell me how much you've done. Have you done between 1 and 25%? Have you done half? And you can pick that option right there. This is the CWPP priorities. I'm not going to go through these one by one. I'll let you read them. The only thing that we are screening projects for to get them on the project list for the CWPP is, if it has public land, do you have permission to do the project? And does this project fit into at least one of the 15 things we're going to ask you yes or no about? You can have multiple of these. The same project might fit into multiple ways in the same one. All I want to know, is this a project that addresses the priorities as identified during the CWPP process, or is it something that's way out to lunch? Like I want to knit purple sweaters for those poor deer who are so cold out there in the wildlands. That might not make it to the CWPP. This is a pretty low bar. You can do this. So just click all that apply, but again, don't click more than apply. It's not a ranking system, doesn't help you to have more, but do click all that apply. And then finally, we're asking you, how was it for you? We want to know. We are working on the tool constantly. We're wanting to make it better. So if you have feedback, please give it to us. If there's confusing stuff, let us know. Feel free to comment. I would deeply appreciate it if you do. So that is the project entry portal. And honestly, it should be a pretty quick. It's located here on the CWPP hub site. We're working on this as we speak. And it will be here. You click on this and it'll open up that project portal for you. I'm going to put this link in the chat right now. We're thinking that's going to open tomorrow. I'm praying. I truly send all of our apologies who've been literally working our fingers to the bone to get this thing done. At the same time, we're trying to get this lot of other details done. So my apologize that it's late, but we're hoping it opens tomorrow, but we'll make sure that Kim pops out an email the minute it's a live go. Are there any questions?
We have a Q&A, a question in the, if our proposal is educational outreach, do we need to complete this mapping exercise?
Yes, because I do need to know where it is. If your project, we really were hoping that we could just, for educational programs, drop a pin on one site, but we couldn't make the map that it's available to us in the survey tool do that. If your project is county-wide, the geographic center of Sonoma County is the airport, the Sonoma County Airport. So you could sort of use that as your project area and indicate clearly in your brief narrative that this is a county-wide educational project. If your project concerns like all of southern Sonoma County, again, I would try to find a geographic center. Don't draw a giant thing, draw a relatively small area for it, because it'll just make the map messy at the end of the day. If we have the whole county chosen.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Carleon. In the interest of time, I think we should move on. Thanks very much. You know, I'm really excited. I've been working with Carleon on the CWPP and the project portal usually for a year, and especially the project entry tool. Last year we used a ranking system and it was a little clunky, so we took that away and created the project entry tool just so we have more information and try to be able to map these projects more carefully. And also show where the gaps are, so we are able to do that on a regular basis. So one of the key points that I really wanted to share with you all is this is a local grant. We're focused on the Sonoma County. We're trying to do the best for our county using this funding from PT&E. Our motivation is to try to improve every year. I think that's illustrated by the fact that the first year we did a lot of like kind of a large area, a lot of different projects. Last year we had really clear criteria that people were able to use. We tried the project ranking tool. We scrapped that to create the project entry tool so that we get more projects consolidated under the county-wide community wildfire protection or prevention plan. So thank you for your patience in helping us improve this. And we always love your feedback. So whether it's good or evil, we are happy to hear it. So thank you very much for that. We have a couple of the questions if we can get to real quick. What will happen to the projects that were previously entered in the CWPP project list?
What we're going to do with those is we are going to pop an email out to everybody who has a list in the 2021 plan. And we will then have you re-enter the project should be pretty low hanging fruit for you to do that. Because you'll have the project description and you can refine the map if you need to. But we need a couple of things. One is we want them all to be in the same system at the same time. Also, it's been more than a year since those projects were entered. So some of those projects may have had changes that we would like to see reflected. And we need to have your confirmation that you in fact still want that project listed in the CWPP. So expect an email in the next week or so if you entered a project last year.
Okay, last question. We'll make it quick. What level of authority do you need for us to demonstrate we have public land approval? In other words, a land steward or state authority? In 3 seconds or less, Carleo, can you share that with us?
Basically, I'm looking for a person who works for that agency, who is an appropriate contact, who we will email and say, we know there's a project in this area. This is in your park. Have you heard of this project and have you worked with these folks? So we're just looking for a contact to email and
Great.
verify that they know about the project.
All right. Thank you very much, Carla. I really appreciate your presentation and great work you're doing behind the scenes. We really appreciate that. All right. Going back to our next section, which would be environmental compliance, I have Robert Aguero from Permit Sonoma in the Natural Resources Division, and he's going to share with us some observations about how CEQA works and what does the lead agency, some of these terms that you might not be familiar with, and he's going to give us the 30-minute spiel about how, not that many minutes, please, Robert, but just kind of give a short introduction about how CEQA works, if you will. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Kim. I will apologize. I don't think I'll be able to match Carleon's excitement about CEQA compliance for this presentation, but I will do my best. So allow me to share my screen. Let's see. Okay. Is everyone seeing the PowerPoint? Great.
That's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you for the introduction, Kim. My name is Robert Aguero. I'm a senior environmental specialist here and registered professional forester in the Natural Resources Division of Permit Sonoma. And we do environmental compliance and CEQA compliance on a daily basis for public and private projects. And so that is why I'm speaking to you today. Let's see. So just a couple of disclaimers. First, I am not a lawyer, so this does not constitute legal advice. And then additionally, during the Q&A session, I won't be able to make any CEQA determinations for your projects. So if you put those in there, like, is this project exempt? I just won't be able to do that for you. I would need a full project description, time to evaluate. So we just don't have time for that. And I think because this is a competitive process for the grant, if you email me and try to ask the same question, is this project exempt? I won't be able to do that as well. So just wanted to put that out there first. So just a quick outline. My presentation plans to go over, what is CEQA, when and to who does it apply, what types of CEQA documents could apply for these projects. I'm going to focus primarily on exemptions and the CalVTP, and then best practices for how you as a grant applicant can comply or help us as the county comply with CEQA. So just starting out, what is CEQA? It is the California Environmental Quality Act. It was enacted in 1970. It was modeled after the federal version, which is called NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. So CEQA, I have the two major locations in state legislature or state code, Public Resource Code, Division 13. The CEQA guidelines are located in California Code of Regulations. And then at the very bottom, I put a link to the PDF that you can find, which is just a free PDF, searchable PDF of CEQA. And so you can go in there, you can go to that link, you just type in CEQA guidelines 2023, that link will pop up, and that will help you just have a copy of it, so that way you don't have to refer back to this presentation for any of the things that I'm going to talk about, but you can actually have it right there in front of you. So CEQA requires state and local government agencies to inform decision makers and the public about the potential environmental impacts of proposed projects and to reduce those environmental impacts to the maximum extent feasible. So CEQA allows for public input into the decision-making process. And again, CEQA is a process. It's not a permit. There is environmental documents that are created as part of the process, but those are disclosures of the environmental impacts. And there really is no permit that is associated with CEQA. So who does CEQA apply to? It applies to public agencies. So us at the county, state agencies, special districts like the RCDs and fire districts. CEQA does not apply to federal agencies or nonprofit groups, private organizations, private landowners, fire safe councils, because those are all private entities. You do not have to comply with CEQA for your project. It is only when the government is involved in some capacity does CEQA begin to apply. And so when CEQA applies, it applies to projects. And so CEQA defines a project as the whole of an action which has a potential for resulting in either a direct physical change in the environment or a reasonably foreseeable indirect physical change in the environment. And that is any of the following, and I've highlighted the one that applies to this evening, which is an activity undertaken by a person which is supported in whole or in part through public agency contracts, grants, subsidies, loans, or other forms of assistance. So basically, because the government is giving money to a project that could impact the environment, we as the government have to comply with CEQA. So the types of CEQA documents that are used to show that a lead agency is compliant with CEQA for a project that they're approving are notices of exemptions. And so there are two types of exemptions. There are categorical exemptions, which I'll talk more about, that are really in CEQA. There are categories of projects that are described, and so hence the term categorical. And then there are what are called statutory exemptions, which these types of projects are exempt by statute. For example, emergency road repairs are generally statutorily exempt, or things that happen after a fire to repair public infrastructure. So these are two types of exemptions that we often deal with. There's also what are called negative declarations or mitigated negative declarations, and these are done when a discretionary project is not exempt, but it has no adverse effects, or if there are potential impacts that can be reduced. And then finally, an EIR or environmental impact report, and these are required if impacts cannot be reduced to a less than significant level as determined by the lead agency. So the CalVTP, which we've been talking quite a bit about, and I'll talk a little bit more about, is based on a program EIR that was completed by the Board of Forestry. I'll get into sort of the nuances of that a little later in my presentation. So like I said, I'm going to focus next on categorical exemptions and then the CalVTP for the sake of this conversation. So categorical exemptions are classes or categories of projects that are determined to not have significant impacts to the environment. So these projects are typically considered exempt from CEQA based on their geographic location and the scope or size of the project. So for example, defensible space is typically exempt from CEQA. CEQA specifically defines the 0 to 30 foot range, and then up to 100 feet if a local fire professional determines that that need is necessary to expand that. So some other examples of categories, and I don't know if you can see my mouse, but these numbers right here next to these categories, if you were to download that CEQA PDF that I was talking about, you could type in those numbers, and that refers to like the specific section of code that it's talking about. So it'd be section 15301 talks about existing facilities exemption, and then there would be a bunch of text about when that exemption applies and potential examples where that exemption may not apply. The classic one that we often see for this grant program is the minor alterations to land exemption, which is 15304, and I'll talk about that on my next slide. Some of the other ones that we've seen for vegetation management projects or used for vegetation management projects are these 15307, 15308 actions by regulatory agencies for natural resources protections, and then 1533. I think I forgot a 3 in there. Small habitat restoration projects. So these are just some of the examples. Again, I would encourage you, if you have the chance, to download that CEQA PDF and look at the categorical exemptions to see how your project may fit. So the class 4 exemption, like I just talked about, the minor alterations to land one, this is the most common one for vegetation management projects. It's often referred to as the defensible space exemption. So I've included the whole text of this particular exemption for defensible space, and I wanted to just sort of highlight the important parts of it. So it's called a minor alteration to land. So we do want to be able to demonstrate that it is considered a minor impact. There's this language about the project not removing healthy, mature, scenic trees. Again, that there is some room for interpretation in there, but generally we don't want to see this exemption used for, large, healthy, mature tree removal in something like a scenic corridor. That would kick it out of that exemption, not really render it applicable. And then specifically related to fuel management activities, the language says within 30 feet of structures to reduce the volume of flammable vegetation, provided that the activities will not result in the taking of endangered, rare, or threatened plant or animal species, or significant erosion and sedimentation of surface waters. So we want to see that demonstrated in your project description, or see if you have considered that, because what we'll do, we'll look at your project that you submit and look at the surrounding area, and if it's in potential, critical habitat for sensitive species, or if it's near streams, we'll start to check those boxes and say, okay, we need to look at this a little more. Have they demonstrated how they're going to avoid those impacts? And then finally, this exemption shall apply to fuel management activities within 100 feet of structure if the public agency having fire protection responsibility for the area has determined that that extra fuel clearance is required due to the conditions. So typically that's just the form of a letter from the applicable fire protection agency, whether it's Sonoma Fire, local fire district, CAL FIRE, etc. So moving on to the Cal VTP, this is a relatively new, in the past 5 years, CEQA compliance method that the county is beginning to utilize. So the Cal VTP was developed as what's called a program EIR by the Board of Forestry, and its intent is to allow other government agencies, which are called project proponents in the Cal VTP, to use this document for CEQA compliance. So projects that use the Cal VTP must occur in the SRA, or have a majority of the project occurring in the SRA, and use the defined treatments, standard project requirements, and mitigation measures in the program EIR for us to find it consistent with the CEQA findings in the program EIR. It covers most types of projects that one would want to use for vegetation management, and does allow for CEQA coverage for future treatments as well, which is a major benefit of this program EIR. Just another note, private landowners can't use the VTP for CEQA compliance without the involvement of an agency willing to take it on as a project proponent. And I just put that in there because I think language often gets thrown around, and we hear often that people are developing Cal VTPs, which is a good idea for grant opportunities like this one. So if you have a Cal VTP that you have developed for a grant, and if the county is willing to adopt that, the county has to agree with the findings that are in the Cal VTP. So we would encourage consultation with a lead agency in the development of your Cal VTP. So then, let's see, moving on from that. So best practices, this is my last slide. So I would encourage everyone has questions about CEQA to read the CEQA guidelines to understand their applicability and their limitations. particularly Article 19, which is where the categorical exemptions are. And then there's a section in there about exceptions that are basically situations where an exemption may not apply based on certain situations. We encourage applicants to describe their project in a detailed narrative. As has been said, like Kim said, include a map, please show where your project will occur, include the footprint. Consider seasonal issues that could impact project timing and budget, like bird nesting season, the wet weather period, burn season, etc. If you need other permits from other agencies for the work that you're completing, we encourage you to get those first, or at least start the process with the applicable resource agency. We don't want the permits to hold up the actual implementation of the project, especially since it's a tight window of 18 months, and sometimes permit processing can take a really long time. And then finally, if possible for you or your organization, please consult with professionals, professional foresters, biologists, land use planners, consulting firms. If you have the ability or the resource to do so, we would really encourage that. Because these folks know what they're doing. They've done this type of work before, and they can really help you out in developing a good project if you need that. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm not sure if we're doing questions or not, but I will just end it there.
CEQA is complicated, and I really appreciate you kind of dialing in on the different requirements. I know there could be many questions. I think for the interest of time, we have about a half an hour left, and I want to be able to share with you some of our ideal cases and some of the characteristics of successful projects. So thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll keep going on. So with that, I'll share my screen with the remainder of our PowerPoint presentation. And again, the importance, this is something to kind of lead in and take advantage of Chief Nichols, who is the pre-fire divisional chief for CAL FIRE, the Sonoma, Lake, and Napa units. So Ben, thank you very much for participating in this process. I wondered if you could just kind of give us some high-level perspective of how CAL FIRE sees the use of these vegetation management grants and its ability to complement the work that you guys are doing.
Sure, Kim, thank you very much. So I'm in charge of the operations here in Sonoma County, and it's one of those things that since 2017 and beyond, it's really been paramount. It brings us back to a campaign that CAL FIRE had years ago about you provide the defense and we'll provide the offense. And when we have these rapidly expanding incidents or these fire events that are occurring over the bulk of Northern California all at the same time, our resources are stretched to the max. And so, you know, California has the most robust mutual aid system in the world. But when those resources are coming from San Diego or Lassen County, it takes hours, if not days, to get here, depending on where they're coming from. So on any good day here in Sonoma County, prior to any incident activity here locally or across the state, there are roughly 100 fire engines, and that truly is an all hands on deck sort of event. So day to day, that's roughly 50 fire engines between the different agencies to get on the road in the first hour or 2 hours of that incident. When we're talking about structured defense on home fires that are threatening the built environment, we're looking for a maximum normally of 1 fire engine per 2 homes. So when we're talking about a fire event that's impacting a community like Rio Nito, Coffee Park, Healdsburg, Fitch Mountain, we run out of fire engines long before we run out of homes to protect. So these grants are absolutely critical. And the Board of Supervisors gave us this resource to be able to bring this unique opportunity to the county to truly prepare the county for those future fire events and to bring about a generational change. So it's really resetting the fire environment so that the firefighters have the best chance of success to be able to get in there and protect life and property and hopefully contain that fire before it becomes a catastrophic event. What we want to see when we're talking about these generational type projects is opportunities to keep the fire out of that built environment. In the last several years, we've had a lot of projects that have come forward, and we've had some great interaction with some of the communities and grantees where the initial proposed projects were very community centric. Well, if we're fighting fire in the community, we're already well behind the power curve. So we want to take that fire away from that community and give firefighters the opportunity to keep it in the undeveloped rural areas rather than going house to house and trying to work on evacuation and fighting fire and putting out burning buildings at the same time. So we're truly looking at things that can make a difference to the on the ground firefighters. And myself and my chief officers here in the county, as well as my station personnel, are more than happy to assist communities, landowners, neighborhood groups in creating those projects. To Kim's point earlier, this is something that really takes time to really vet out and make sure that it's the right project and we've got the landowner buy-in, because there's a lot of times where a group of individuals identify a need, but as we've seen, unfortunately, several times, that critical landowners have not bought into that project, and therefore the project as a whole doesn't have the strategic value that it would have had we had all of the entities bought into what needs to happen. And then to go with that, it's one of those things that we need to have a maintenance component. The thing about vegetation, it's like hair, it grows back. And so if we don't have a means to maintain the work that's done, it doesn't take more than a handful of years for a lot of those gains to be lost as that vegetation comes back. And so whether or not that's prescribed grazing, prescribed fire, ongoing mechanical treatments, we really want to see an opportunity, or we want to see the ability for the local community, neighborhood, or entity to be able to maintain the initial work that's been put in, because without that, then we've got a short-term solution to a long-term problem. So happy to help wherever we can. As I said before, whether or not that's shared to the group here tonight or however we'd like to do that, but I would be happy to communicate with landowners, grantees, and or steer them in the direction of my personnel to help them build projects for future success. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate your comments. And I think we've really appreciated the partnership we have with CAL FIRE. They've been part of our Vegetation Management Technical Advisory Committee and being able to assist us in evaluating all the project proposals over the last couple of years. We have had two questions related to CEQA I'd like to address. There was one question that was submitted. Let me pull that up real quick. That was at the bottom. The grant application states that your project must be either exempt from CEQA or CEQA review must be complete before the grant award. And that isn't correct. Our perspective is that we want to see progress, that you've been able to been in communication with a government entity like Permit Sonoma, and you feel like your project is under an exemption. You should state which exemption that it would fall into. In the end of the day, through the grant process, we will have Permit Sonoma evaluate the project and help you prepare the notice of exemption if it qualifies for grant funding to go further. Is that correct, Robert? Just to clarify.
Yeah, I thought I meant to include a slide that showed how that environmental compliance section, you would fill that out, because what typically happens, right? You as a private landowner, private group, you can't do CEQA, you can't file an exemption. And so what we are asking for is for you to tell us which, CEQA pathway you are choosing to use, and ideally your project description will marry up with that, and we'll be just able to say yes, we agree with that, or no, we don't. And then so that would be how that would work. So if your project is exempt as you describe it and it's chosen, then we would work with you to then file and create and file that notice of exemption for the county. So that's how that would work.
All right, great. Thanks very much for that. Let me see, moving along. We just have a couple other slides. I really appreciate all the questions that you folks have been able to provide us through the Q&A. That's been really helpful. I just want to kind of highlight some of the projects from 2022 that have made great progress. And some of that is related to people who were well organized, figure out what they needed, and then submitted a project that was environmentally was compliant with CEQA, and they decided to go directly with contractual arrangements with various crews. And those crews were able to do the work on a focused basis, and many of the projects that we funded in June of last year are already completed. So that to me is a good indication of success over time. And so then going down to the next group of projects, we did support the CalVTP process for 5 projects in the round of from July of 2021 through April of last year. We identified several projects that did want to have merit going through the CalVT process. And so we are again going to support funding for projects that have scoped out a project that has a positive impact on communities and their ability to be wildfire resilient. This is something where we highlight that CalVTPs will be funded through this grant if they meet those criteria that we've described in the rest of the presentation. But those are some examples that won't be completed till the latter part of their grant cycle. So we want you to get organize the different surveys, biological and cultural resource surveys, and work with a professional to be able to do and prepare that document in an 18-month period so that projects can be implemented shortly thereafter. But having a successful CalVTP really leans towards excellent funding opportunities through CAL FIRE or other funding sources that see that you have a CalVTP that's approved, been through the process, and then you will be able to get much better opportunities for funding for these larger scale projects. So with that, I kind of want to review the project types that we want to support. As I mentioned again, environmental compliance, there is funding to be able to support a CalVTP. Community education and outreach, we're really excited about being able to fund that. Defensible space and community risk reduction. This is more consistent with the CWPP that Carleone has shared with us, something that we did not fund as much in 2022. We did fund some projects in 2021, but we feel that it is important to be able to support that if it's well organized and trying to go at scale. Access and egress, we've seen great deals of success of projects that have been working on that realm, and also wildlands fuel treatments. So then some other criteria that we want all proposals or applications to consider are how do these projects have multiple benefits? Does it do defensible space and consider important fuel breaks that CAL FIRE or other fire departments could use to access an area when a fire comes in that area? And does it consider ecosystem health? Does it provide access and functional needs for low-income populations? So these are factors we want you to consider. And can you possibly address that component in your project proposal? We are not disillusional that you're not going to meet every goal, but these are the ideals. And if we get proposals that are able to hit on a majority of these things and do a really good job of explaining that, then they're going to have a better opportunity. This is a competitive process, so we want people to be able to do a good job there. So with that, just a couple of examples of shaded fuel breaks and a treatment that happened on Calabasas Creek Open Space Preserve. Just some of the ideas. This was an area that had been burned and the revegetation is really creating greater fuel load. So we were trying to figure out how to treat that. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and be able to open it up to other additional questions. Let me see. Thank you for answering that. Some of our panelists have already answered some of the questions. If you do have a question you'd like to raise your hand, feel free to do so now. And I can hopefully call on you and be able to unmute you. So by raising your hand, you can ask a question, or you can use the Q&A and we can respond to any questions there as well. That means we've answered every single question. That's amazing. That is an all-time first. So I think this has been really helpful to have every perspective that's involved with the Vegetation Management Grant Program. CAL FIRE, Permit Sonoma, and Ag and Open Space have all been working on this issue for 2 and 3 years, and in many cases for a lifetime, in the case of Chief Nichols. But it's really helpful to have this kind of collaboration. I see David Gleba, if you could, let me see if I can unmute you. This is Kim's, here we go. All right, so you raised your hand and let's go ahead and allow you to talk. You are unmuted, David, please.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Hey, a quick question for Chief Nichols. Is there any map or anything online that will show where CAL FIRE would like sort of priority fuel breaks or vegetation management work done?
At this point, no, but that's where the collaboration with us comes into play. So the easy button is there are watershed maps that show the dividing lines between the different watersheds, and those are the prominent ridge lines that separate the different watersheds. So that's the starting point. But as an example, perfect is the enemy of good. And so where we would love to be on top of ridges on a shaded fuel break, we also want to make sure that there's the ability to maintain and or to get resources into that area to be able to maintain it during the winter time. So there's a great example along the county line, north of Trinity Road, splitting Napa and Sonoma County, where the initial ridge line runs the true ridge line. But then in order to continue that fuel break to the north, we're going to have to come down off of that ridge onto a property owner's property and through Sugarloaf to get back up onto the ridge line that separates the county. So happy to coordinate with you and give you information or share my battalion chief's contacts for establishing some help for that project that you're looking for. But as it stands, there's not a CAL FIRE map for that.
Thank you.
Okay, does let me check to see if there's any other questions. Trying to multitask. All right, no other questions right now. I did want to share with everyone that we on April 6th, which is Thursday, the Swanton Pacific Ranch, which is managed by Cal Poly, they have a training program. And Robert, myself, Bob Neal from Sonoma Land Trust, and Marshall Tuberville will be giving a presentation on how Cal VTPs can apply to prescribed burns. And so I can send out a link if I can concentrate well enough to be able to include that. But you're welcome to join that and sign up for that training. It's from 10 o'clock till 12 o'clock on this Thursday. So let me try to track that down. Carleon, do you have anything else you want to share with the Cal VTP or the CWPP process?
Nope. Hang on. I'm kind of excited that we're at this stage of being able to really look globally at projects that are being proposed across the county, so that we can begin to really look at priority landscapes and how we move the ball down the road to create that generational change that we're all looking for reducing our risk to wildland fire.
That's great.
And this is a collaborative process, so I really encourage you guys to stay in touch with us throughout it, and comments are more than welcome.
Well done, Carleon. Just enough pause to be able to allow me to insert that link. All right.
I was watching your lips, Kim.
Oh God, is that really that obvious? God, I thought that's so subtle. So folks, we really appreciate all the input we received from you. Again, this is emphasis on the collaborative nature of this work, and it does in fact take a village to figure this all out, and we think we're making some progress. We always appreciate your feedback. please take a look at the guidelines first, then open up the application, fill out your application, and then go to Carleone's website, which will launch tomorrow. She promised us. So I appreciate everyone's patience on that. But we do, it's a technical beast. And so we're really hoping that we can make this as smooth as possible for everyone. So without seeing any other additional questions, Robert or Ben, would you like to share any other closing comments? Okay. All right, great. Well, then I will say goodnight on behalf of the team. Thank you again for all your participation, and we look forward to receiving your applications. Have a good night, folks.